Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the VA's partnership webinar with the National Cemetery Administration. My name is Nicholas Walters, and I am going to be your moderator for a little while this morning until Lester Pauling is on. But I would like to thank the National Cemetery Administration for partnering with us this afternoon. True.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nicholas. Good afternoon. This webinar is a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, CFBNP, and the National Cemetery Administration Scheduling Office. My name is Lester Pauling. I am the Senior Outreach Specialist in CFBNP. I will be your moderator this afternoon. Everyone's phone has been muted. If you have a question during the presentation today, please type it in the Q&A box on the right of your screen. I will read the questions at the end of the presentation, and the presenter will provide a response. This presentation will not be made available after the webinar. This is a live recording. I would like to thank Mr. J. Dalrymple and Mr. Steve Ecker for this collaboration. We are grateful for your time today. But before we get started, I would like to introduce Mr. Conrad Washington, Director of the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, who will provide today's welcoming remarks. Mr. Washington retired from the United States Marine Corps with 20 years of active duty service with a combat tour in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom II. Mr. Washington is a licensed minister actively serving in his faith. He received his master's degree of divinity in pastoral studies from Moody Theological Seminary. He also holds a MA in business management and a Bachelor of Science degree in education. Additionally, he is a graduate of VA's class of 2017 Virtual Aspiring Leaders Program. Mr. Washington?
Thank you, True. I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us on this rainy day here in Washington, D.C. But we appreciate you taking time to join us. This month brings a lot of religious celebrations. I know we are celebrating a lot of different things. We are in Lent season. We have the Hindu Maha Shivaratri, hope I pronounced that correctly, Ramadan. And then obviously we have Resurrection Sunday, which is Easter coming up, the end of the month, Good Friday, all those things. But I also want us to, I ask that you keep in your prayers all those who are being held against their will, the different things that's going on in the country. We have political unrest, social unrest, Gaza, Israel. I can just go down the list. A lot of things going on. Amongst all of your other responsibilities that you all have as families and your occupations, I just ask that we kind of look at each other and respect diversity as we continue to walk through our journeys of life. Because we all have different backgrounds, different faith, ethnicities, but we're here together in the VA at this point today to serve veterans, families, and caregivers and beneficiaries. So we appreciate you, dialing into our channel today so that we can share information with you from our great speakers that we have. We've had them on before, great colleagues of ours, VA colleagues. Jay Dalrymple is the director, and Steve Ecker, assistant director. They do great work in NCA, and we appreciate you. I want you all both to know that I appreciate you taking time to join us. But let me just stop rattling on. And again, thank you all for joining us. And I really believe you're going to get a lot out of today's message. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. J. Dalrymple, Director of the NCA Scheduling Office, who will provide some opening remarks. Please read a summary of his bio on the screen. Mr. Dalrymple has been the Director of the National Cemetery Scheduling Office and Deputy Director of Field Programs since October 2019. He is responsible for all scheduling and eligibility activities, including pre-need determinations for veterans and family members. Mr. Dalrymple graduated in 2019 from the National Cemetery Administration Comprehensive Year-Long Cemetery Director Intern Program. Mr. Dalrymple is an Air Force veteran. At this time, I give you Mr. J. Dalrymple for today's opening remarks. Jay?
Thank you, Trulesta, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for the privilege to speak with you today. So as Trulesta said, my name is Jay Dalrymple. I'm with the VA's National Cemetery Administration serving as the director of the NCA's National Cemetery Scheduling Office located here in St. Louis, Missouri. With me today, I have Steve Ecker, who is the Assistant Director of the Scheduling Office, and he will be presenting the materials to you today. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with NCA, the VA operates 155 national cemeteries and 34 soldiers' lots and numerous monument sites in 42 states, including Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Alaska. There are more than 4 million Americans, including veterans of every war and conflict, buried in VA's national cemeteries. And veterans have earned these burial benefits through our service and sacrifice to our nation. So the National Cemetery Scheduling Office was established to support our veterans and their family members during one of the most difficult times in their lives. Almost all requests for burial in the National Cemetery now come through the scheduling office. So we like to say we're the gateway to NCA. Today, we want to provide you with information on a couple of very important topics. Number one, the high-level eligibility requirements for burial in a national cemetery. And number two, the pre-need burial program NCA offers our living veteran service members and their dependents to assist them with end-of-life planning. We also want to answer any questions you may have about the National Cemetery Administration and the pre-need program. So we welcome your questions and we'll get you answers as quickly as we can. So again, thank you for your attendance and for the opportunity to present this information to you. With that, True, I'll turn it back to you so we can begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Dalrymple. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Steve Ecker. Steve is the Assistant Director of the National Cemetery Scheduling Office. He's been there since April 2020. In this position, Mr. Ecker is responsible for assisting the Director with all scheduling and eligibility activities for veterans and their families. Mr. Ecker is a veteran. He was in the Navy. He is a member of the United States Navy Ceremonial Guard, Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, Washington, D.C. At this time, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Steve Ecker. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trulesta. Mr. Washington, as Jay said, it's always an honor and privilege to be able to support your all's mission and speak with the group today. As Trulesta mentioned, I'm Steve Ecker. I'm the Assistant Director here at the National Cemetery Scheduling Office. Support the Director, Jay. Jay and I, we have an important mission. We oversee all the cemeteries throughout the country and delivering benefits to those fallen at their most needed time of need. So I'm going to go ahead and go off camera here. I wanted to start by kind of going over the agenda for today. So what we're going to talk about, as Jay said, high-level eligibility requirements for burial in National Cemetery, and we'll also discuss the pre-need program, how to apply, some general guidelines there, and what to expect after you apply. So for the agenda today, we're going to talk about the burial in the VA National Cemetery, what is included in the burial benefit. We have some frequently asked questions. We found that a lot of times addressing questions from past presentations is helpful because after all, that's why we're here, is to answer questions that people have and share information. Talk about persons eligible for burial, discuss the pre-need eligibility program, how to apply, and how to fill out the VA Form 40-10,007. So let's go ahead and get into high level. What does the burial benefit include? It includes a grave site at any national cemetery with available space, and that's for casket and cremation burials. Grave liner, or you may hear it called a vault. It's provided by the VA, and that's essentially a concrete liner that the caskets are placed in. Opening and closing of the grave, and of course, perpetual care of the grave site is included. Government headstone marker or niche cover is also provided. Burial flag, Presidential Memorial Certificate, otherwise known as PMC, and military honors. While they're not provided and included in the burial benefit, we do assist in providing the families the contact information to reach out to at the time of scheduling. Let's talk about a couple things that are family responsibilities that aren't covered in the burial benefit. Those include costs associated with funeral home or preparation services, costs pertaining to cremation services, costs for purchase of a casket or an urn. So the VA does not actually provide a casket or an urn or cremation services. There is some confusion out there with the public, but that is not part of the burial benefit as far as NCA is concerned. Transportation of any sort, to include transportation to the National Cemetery, cost of funeral home storage, and costs for obtaining a gravesite, in a private cemetery. However, families may be eligible through VBA, through the Veteran Burial Allowance, to assist in offsetting some of funeral costs. More information can be provided by reaching out to VBA and inquiring. And finally, any costs associated with disinterring an individual from a private cemetery to a national cemetery would be the cost incurred by the family. So let's get into a few frequently asked questions. We have about 2 or 3 pages of questions, but again, these are all questions that were asked of us in past presentations that we thought would be helpful. Let's get into it. Can I be buried at any national cemetery? The answer is yes. Veterans and eligible dependents can be buried in any national cemetery with available grave sites. No geographical restrictions apply. So we have a veteran in California. If he or she so chooses, they can be buried in New York, as long as there's available space in the cemetery and that individual is eligible. Is a spouse required to be buried in the same national cemetery as the veteran? That question, the answer there is no. Veteran and spouse do not have to be interred in the same cemetery. So let's use that same instance. The veteran passed away and the family was in California. The family is now relocated to the East Coast. Now the spouse passes away. The spouse can be buried away from the veteran on the East Coast. Will my spouse be buried next to me or with me in the same gravesite? Non-veteran spouses of eligible veterans are interred in the same gravesite. Not next to the veteran, but in the same gravesite. Now, if both spouse are veterans and are eligible, an adjacent gravesite, or you may hear it be called as a set-aside, may be requested for the surviving spouse, so that's there and reserved at their time of need. Does it matter if I am in a casket or cremated? Again, this depends on site availability at the national cemetery of the family's choosing. So some cemeteries are closed to casket burials. Some cemeteries do not accept cremated remains burials. So it all just depends on the availability of that particular cemetery. Does the National Cemetery Administration manage Arlington National Cemetery? No. The Arlington National Cemetery is actually managed by the Department of the Army, and inquiries for burial there should be directly to Arlington. Some more questions. Is my wife listed on the headstone? Also, excuse me. Yes, veteran information is generally on the front and the spouse information is presented on the back of the headstone. Can I get a headstone if I'm cremated? A headstone is provided regardless of the interment type and is required for all interments. Are there costs to have my spouse buried? There are no costs for burial benefits provided by VA. Families are responsible, however, for funeral home or other expenses that we covered in the previous slide. And the key to this piece is before arriving at the cemetery. So the easiest way to remember it is once the family drives through the gates of the National Cemetery with their loved one, everything from that point is covered by the burial benefit. Can I request just a service in military honors if I'm not being interred in a national cemetery? Yes, that is referred to as a memorial service where the families allotted time to have a service and military honors, but not actually an interment takes place. We see this a lot with cremated remains. The family will have their loved one cremated and not quite be ready to let go. So they'll come to the cemetery, have military honors and service, and then they'll take their loved one home. And then, maybe in a month, 2 months, a year, they're ready for the interment. They come to us and we can accommodate them at that time. What is the difference between in-ground cremation burial and being placed in the columbarium wall? It's kind of self-explanatory, but an in-ground cremation is similar to a traditional casket burial. Columbarium is the niche above ground. The placement of the cremated remains goes in the niche above ground. Some may refer to it as a mausoleum. One more list of questions here. If you are 100% service connected, what will the VA cover if buried in a national cemetery? So as I mentioned on the first few slides, whether you're service connected or not, the burial benefit remains the same, and that's the burial gravesite in the national cemetery, opening and closing, grave vault or liner, and perpetual care. And then, of course, the government headstone, burial flag, and presidential memorial certificate. Does the VA help to pay to reserve a gravesite at an outside private cemetery? We also covered this. The answer for that would be no. If the family wishes to inter in a private cemetery, that's the responsibility of the family. However, if they do choose to bury in a private cemetery, they may be eligible for a VA furnished headstone and marker and can apply for that. Is there a time limit for requesting burial? And the instance in one of the last presentations was my husband's cremated remains were not placed in the VA National Cemetery at his time of passing 3 years ago. Am I still able to apply? Absolutely. There are no time limits for requesting burial from NCA. If you're, as I mentioned, if you're not ready to let go of your loved one, you can wait to call us and we can determine eligibility and schedule at that time. Or you can call and set up a case and we'll hold it. But I would recommend if you're unsure, if you want to go on with the interment at this time, just take your time, be with your loved one, and then give us a call when you're ready to proceed. My dad and I are both veterans, so we need 2 separate VA forms and another for my mother, correct? That is correct. VA Form 40-10,007, that's the application for pre-need determination for burial form, is required for each individual who is requesting a determination. This includes veterans and spouses. Can you use your VA award letter with all the information on it to apply for a pre-need determination? The DD 214 or discharge document is always required for burial, but however, we can use that eligibility letter showing a service connection rating of 0 or greater as being eligible, and we can use that to determine that an individual is eligible, but we will always go out into VA systems and as needed, request the discharge document from our resources. But the discharge document is always required. But if an individual does have their award letter, we definitely recommend that they provide that at the time of calling. Okay, let's change gears here a little bit and let's talk about headstone and markers. What information is on the marker? As many of you may have seen, if you attended a service or visited a national cemetery, the markers are very standard. The headstones includes the legal name, veteran's branch of service, beginning and ending years of the person's life, section and grave number. A lot of times you'll see additional or optional inscriptions at the bottom. Those are provided, and that's the choice of the family. The cemetery usually handles that with the family, but those are optional inscriptions that can be placed on the headstone. So let's talk about who is actually eligible for burial in a VA National Cemetery. Veterans, service members, spouses, and dependents may be eligible for burial in a national cemetery if they meet one of the following requirements. A veteran who didn't receive a dishonorable discharge, or a service member who died while on active duty for training, or inactive duty for training, or is the spouse or minor child of an eligible veteran. And in some cases, unmarried adult children of veterans can be eligible. So what is a veteran? For NCA purposes, the term veteran means a person who served in an active military, naval, or air service and who discharged or released therefrom under conditions other than dishonorable. Some common categories of persons eligible. There's kind of two different sections of persons eligible, and it's kind of delineated by a year and a certain point in time, a year. So let's first look at veterans with one or more days of active service. This applies to enlisted members who enlisted on or before September 7th, 1980, and officers who enlisted on or before October 16th of 81. In these instances, all that service member needs is 1 day of active duty, and they could qualify for burial and be discharged under conditions other than dishonorable. So now let's look at the next category. So after September 7th, 1980, laws changed a little bit, and now there was a requirement to serve at least 24 consecutive months or 2 years. So after September 7th, 1980, or October 16th of 81 for officer, now there's a 24-month requirement to serve in an active component for at least 2 years. There are some exceptions. Discharge or released under early out or hardship discharges, or anyone who was discharged or released because of a disability, determined service connected, or any disability where compensable service connection was granted. Some other common categories, persons having pensionable or compensable status. Really what we're saying is if someone is service connected or receiving a pension, they are eligible for burial. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, any individual rated 0% or greater are eligible for burial. You see it a lot more, now than we have. We're doing some more outreach to make the public and veterans aware. But if for some reason someone would apply and say they were a reservist and they're not service connected, at this time they wouldn't qualify necessarily because they wouldn't have active duty. But in the future, if they determine and go for request compensation for service connected disability, and the VA does determine that they are service connected at 0% or greater, that individual is now eligible for burial. So that's important to remember. As things change, that can change the determination and if that individual would be eligible for burial and other benefits. Spouse or unremarried surviving spouses. So in general, the spouse of an eligible veteran is eligible for burial as long as they're married at the time of death. A lot of times, in some instances, we'll need proof of marriage, and that's usually verified through the death certificate of the individual who predeceased. On the death certificate, that will show us who the surviving spouse and informant is, and that's how we can link legal marriage at the time of death. So now let's talk about some denials. Unfortunately, not everyone is eligible for burial in National Cemetery, and that's part of our job here at the National Cemetery Scheduling Office, in being the only office that can actually officially deny a burial request, and unfortunately it happens. Some common categories are dishonorable for VA purposes. These are instances when a veteran may have other than honorable discharge or a dishonorable discharge, and we've sent a request to VA to have that service record adjudicated, and the VA has determined that service as being DVA or dishonorable for VA purposes. Probably the biggest portion of our denials, unfortunately, are around active duty for training and reservist and guard persons. So active duty for training, this is for generally your 6-year, 8-year enlistment reservist who served all their 8 years, did their monthly or yearly training, or every 6 months went on their 6 months of active duty for training and completed their period honorably. Fortunately, in those cases, the individual most likely is not eligible for burial because they have active duty for training only, which is not qualifying active service. As we talked about before, after September 7, 1980, individuals who were in an active branch but served less than 2 years. We see this a lot. Individual might have served 1 year and 5 months and decided to get out or got discharged for a reason. They wouldn't be eligible for burial. And then reserve and guard. We see, unfortunately, a lot of reservists and guards persons who go through a lot of their life thinking they're eligible, just to find out that, they didn't necessarily have qualifying active duty. They might have been called up for a state emergency by the governor. We call that Title 32. Title 32 activations do not qualify. We're looking for federal call-ups under Title 10. Generally presidential executive orders. If a guards person was called up for a Title 10 executive order and completed the period for which ordered, then that individual could be eligible based on that time. Or another way to be eligible if you're retired or if you're a reserve or guards person is to serve 20 years and be eligible for retirement pay. You can see some other denial reasons listed. No military information. This very rarely happens. We will do everything we can here at NCSO to find military information, but there are instances where we just can't find anything, and we work with the families as much as we can, but we do have those instances. Then merchant marine service, there's separate requirements for merchant mariners, non-U.S. citizens, and you'll see some other reasons there. So let's kind of change gears here again, and let's start talking about the pre-need program. As Jay mentioned, we have a pre-need eligibility program. What this does, it allows individuals to find out in advance if they can be buried in a national cemetery. The main reason why this program was started is simply to make the burial process and planning easier for the family, to eliminate the burden and delays at the time of need. It's important to note that pre-need means before the time of need. So when we say time of need, we're actually referring to before the time of death. So with that in mind, a pre-need determination would not be appropriate if there is a death of a veteran and they're requesting burial at the time of need. That instance, it wouldn't go through our pre-need department. They would simply call our scheduling office and we treat it like a time of need case. So let's talk about a few more details of the pre-need program. It's for requests in VA national cemeteries only. And it's important to know that it does not ensure space in any particular cemetery and is not a reservation. Approval status may change and additional verification at the time of need may be required. So when you apply for a pre-need, there's an option on the form to select the desired cemetery. We simply ask that for tracking purposes as we can kind of look at utilization and kind of get an idea of what cemeteries are being looked at. But it doesn't actually reserve you a spot in that cemetery. So if you put Jefferson Barracks, I'll use an example because they're here in St. Louis. If for some reason that cemetery would close, that individual would have to choose a different national cemetery. So who are our recommended applicants for the pre-need program? Of course, anyone can apply for a pre-need determination, but to better serve those that mostly need it and for as far as being able to process the request as quick as possible and provide the best service. We have certain people, certain categories that we really want to look at. That includes unmarried adult children. So these are children who are physically or mentally disabled. They may be determined eligible. A lot of times they may already be determined as a helpless child with VA. These are physically or mentally disabled children who are incapable of self-support and who probably have relied on the veteran or the family, their most of their lives for support. Reservists who are unsure if their service qualifies for burial. This is one of the biggest areas, that we look at. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of confusion about what service qualifies. Active duty for training doesn't. So we want to see requests for reservists. That way we can go look at the entire record and get all that legwork out of the way and let the family know or the veteran before they pass away if they're eligible. Veterans, family members, or individuals with specific questions regarding their eligibility. So for a guards person, I was called up under Title 32. I'm not sure if that qualifies. Encourage you to apply for pre-need. Again, with the reservist, I didn't serve 20 years. I did my active duty for training. I think this qualifies because it was an actual active duty call up. We want to see that application. And surviving remarried spouses of previously interred veterans. I will tell you, even if a spouse remarries, if the veteran predeceases, that spouse is still eligible for burial with that veteran, even if they remarry, as long as they were married at the time of death. Okay, so what information is needed to apply? Like any VA benefit or any benefit in general, there's a standard form and some information that's standard and required. Social Security number, date and place of birth, military status, as much discharge and service information as you can provide. If it's a spouse or surviving spouse or unmarried adult child, we'll need the information on that individual as well. If someone is applying on behalf of a veteran, have power of attorney, but we may need the appointment of the veteran VSO, the form 2122 or claimant's representative form. So let's talk about the actual pre-need form. So as I mentioned before, it's the VA 40-10,007. So essentially it's a 3-section form, but we do see some confusion and questions on this. So we're actually looking to hopefully here soon make some changes to the form to make it a little bit easier as far as filling out and as far as taking information from this form into our VA systems. But first, you want to choose the VA cemetery where you prefer to be buried. So as I mentioned before, there is a section on desired cemetery. But again, this is not a reservation. It does not reserve you a spot in that cemetery. And as I mentioned, the applications do not apply to Arlington. And second, you're going to gather your supporting documents and information. Be sure to fill out an application for each person or claimant requesting a determination. So when we go back to the FAQ scenario, each individual requesting a pre-need determination needs a form signed by the claimant. So section 1 of the form is the veteran information. This is just standard information on the veteran, some demographic information, but most importantly, box 15, we encourage everyone to put as much information in there as they can, as far as information pertaining to your military service. Section 2 is the claimant information. So it's important to note that the veteran and the claimant may not necessarily always be the same person. So say this is a VA form 10,007 for a spouse. This would be the place for the spouse information. This isn't specific to the veteran. So in section 1 would be the veteran information. This is specific to the actual claimant filling out the form. So this would be the spouse information. In the instances where the veteran is applying for themselves, then of course the information in section 1 and 2 would be the same. Then section 3 is a certification and signature. So as I mentioned, each form needs to be filled out for each claimant. The claimant section, claimant information in section 2 needs to be specific to the claimant, and in section 3 needs to be signed by the claimant. Box 34, you'll see that has an option to identify the relationship, whether it's self or an individual signing for a claimant. So how does one apply? There are several methods to apply. You can apply through the web on va.gov. That's the preferred method. You can also download the VA form 10,007, and you can either mail it or fax it in. For faster processing, again, we ask you to submit all documentation with your application. So we always say err on the side of caution, err on the side of more information. So whether you think the document's relevant or not, I would go ahead and send it. The more information we can have to go on, especially if we need to order records, the better. So after you apply, what happens? Our goal is to complete your application within 120 days of receipt. So currently, we're processing requests much faster than 120 days, which is great. But our goal is to get a response within 120 days of receipt. We will send information via postal service once the application has been reviewed and a determination is made. So we'll either send you a letter stating we may need more information, or we'll send a letter stating that the individual is approved, or we may, in some instances, send a letter that the individual is not eligible. So once we have that determination made, we will send correspondence through the postal service. For updates or questions on pre-need, you can call the number on the screen and choose option 4. Our pre-need staff is here Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30 Central or 5:30 Eastern to answer any questions you may have regarding the pre-need program or burial benefits in general. We do ask that please be patient and wait to hear back about your application rather than resubmitting. So if you submit a request online through va.gov, you will receive a confirmation page that the request was submitted successfully. But you may not necessarily receive an actual follow-up email saying we received your application. So when you see that on-screen verification that it was submitted successfully, that's letting you know that the VA did receive your application, and we'll process it as quick as we can, and we'll provide a response within 120 days of the receipt. For more information about anything that I talked about today, you can see the URL there for va.gov burials and memorials. A lot of good information about eligibility criteria in general, what's provided, headstones and markers, the pre-need eligibility program, our Veteran Legacy Memorial Program, everything that NCA is doing, a lot of good information on that website. So that's all I had to share with you today. Again, True and Mr. Washington, it's been an honor again to share with the group, and look forward to answering some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that wealth of information. We appreciate you and Jay's support so very much. We're so grateful for your time today. I do not see any questions as of yet. For our audience on the line, if you do have questions, you can send them to the points of contact that you see on the screen. This is Jay and Steve's email address where you can send questions. At this time, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Mr. Washington for closing remarks. Also, I want to say here is a list of our office, point of contact information as well. Mr. Washington's email address and my email address, and Mr. Walters and Mr. Morales' email address. If you have any questions for any of our team, also listed here is our website, email address, and Facebook social media page. If you need to reach any of us, we will make ourselves available to you. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and close out this webinar. If you registered for this webinar today, we will you will be able to see it as a recording on our website in a couple of weeks. We will also provide, or you can also provide or subscribe to our website and Facebook for future webinars and information. This adjourns today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a safe and wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.